When nations go to war, the fighting is driven by state budgets, territorial disputes, and political ideology. We think of massive clashing armies marching on orders from capitals hundreds of miles away. But occasionally, the violence on the battlefield is financed by an individual with a highly specific, deeply personal grievance. This is the economics of spite. It's a transactional approach to warfare where a grieving person liquidates their assets, bypasses the traditional military recruitment lines, and personally buys their way onto the front lines to enact revenge. Unlike a state-sponsored campaign, these private wars operate without the standard limitations of military strategy. When a combatant has already lost their entire life's foundation, the usual calculations of risk and self-preservation no longer apply. We can see this exact dynamic play out across two vastly different eras. In 1343 France, a noblewoman named Jeanne de Clisson lived as a member of the high aristocracy. 600 years later, in the 1941 Soviet Union, a 20-year-old woman named Maria Oktyabrevska served on the Military Wives' Council while training as a nurse to support her husband Ilya's career. Both of these lives were suddenly shattered. For Jeanne, the French king ordered her husband executed on entirely fabricated treason charges. The state murdered the person she loved most. For Maria, the devastation came at the outbreak of World War II. Her husband Ilya was shipped off to the front lines and killed in action while defending Kiev against the German invasion. In both 14th century France and the mid-20th century Soviet Union, the systems that took their husbands offered no recourse for justice and explicitly barred women from formal military command. They were expected to quietly accept their grief. Jeanne rejected that expectation. She immediately gathered her title deeds and sold off all her French noble lands and estates to the highest bidder. Maria took a similar path. She packed up her home and sold literally every single physical possession she owned, gathering every ruble she could find. Both women converted their static grief into liquid capital. While they couldn't legally enlist, hard currency could purchase heavy military power. When basic enrollment is denied, massive piles of cash create a bureaucratic loophole, forcing the state to give you a seat at war. Jeanne used her sudden influx of capital to buy 3 massive warships. She painted the wooden hulls pitch black and dyed the sails blood red to ensure maximum psychological impact before her fleet even reached its targets. Maria took her funds straight to the Red Army, donating her entire fortune with strict instructions to manufacture a T-34 tank. Along with the donation, she included a letter to the government containing a specific, non-negotiable demand. When the tank was finished, she would be the one driving it. Surprisingly, the Soviet State Defense Committee looked at the massive pile of free money and agreed to the terms. They quickly enrolled the grieving widow in a 5-month armored training program. Upon graduation, she was assigned to the 26th Guards Tank Brigade. She grabbed some paint and stenciled the words "Fighting Girlfriend" across the side of her new vehicle, turning a standard piece of Soviet hardware into a highly personal weapon of spite. For the next 13 years, Jane became a permanent terror in the English Channel. She used her black fleet to relentlessly hunt down and board French ships. Once aboard, she delivered a gruesome return on investment. She would personally pull out an axe and begin beheading French nobles, making sure the surviving crew carried a very clear message back to the king, who killed her husband. 6 centuries later, in October 1943, Maria drove the Fighting Girlfriend into its first battle near Smolensk. She steered her tank directly into German lines, systematically obliterating a string of machine gun nests and artillery positions. Her male crew members initially viewed her presence as a publicity stunt, doubting a middle-aged widow could handle armored combat. She shattered their skepticism entirely through her sheer effectiveness in that first fight. The battle escalated, and her tank took a direct hit from a heavy artillery shell, completely disabling its treads and leaving the crew stranded in the line of fire. Instead of waiting for a rescue, Maria ignored all battlefield protocol. She began leaping out of the hatch in the middle of massive firefights to physically repair the metal treads herself, successfully driving her crew to safety. Both women demonstrated a level of combat commitment that exceeded the limits of state-trained soldiers. By removing the instinct for self-preservation, they reached an intensity on the battlefield that their peers found impossible to match. These campaigns ended very differently. Jeanne survived her 13-year maritime crusade and eventually retired. Maria's vengeance tour, however, met a brutal end in January 1944. During a heavy assault, Maria pushed her tank into position and destroyed a long line of German defenses. But for a third time in her short career, incoming artillery knocked out her treads. She jumped out under a storm of enemy fire and successfully repaired the damage. But just as she turned to climb back inside, artillery shell fragments struck her in the head, knocking her unconscious. She fell into a coma and died from her wounds 2 months later. For her actions, she was posthumously awarded the Hero of the Soviet Union, the state's absolute highest military distinction. Both women demonstrated that profound grief, when paired with significant capital, provides a way to circumvent traditional military hierarchies and dictate the terms of their own participation in history. It leaves us with a fairly straightforward historical lesson. Do not underestimate the lengths a grieving partner will go to. If you take away everything they love, they will gladly buy a medieval axe or a heavy tank just to make you pay.